Corpse found in the Velvet Atrium. A Deadly Nero Wolfe Case. Welcome, dear listener, to another evening of intrigue and intellect in the world of classic detective fiction. Tonight, we delve into a tale inspired by the masterful Rex Stout, Corpse Found in the Velvet Atrium, A Deadly Nero Wolfe Case. Settle into your favourite armchair, perhaps with a cup of tea or a fine brandy, and let the mysteries of 1940s New York unfold. I'm your guide through this shadowy puzzle. Relax, speculate along with me, and remember, the devil is in the details. Chapter 1. The Velvet Invitation. Speculate aloud if you wish. The walls here have heard stranger things. The brownstone stood on West 35th Street. 3 stories of weathered sandstone that had watched the city grow from gas lamps to neon, without ever changing its mind about dignity. Inside, the air carried 3 permanent perfumes: Fritz Brenner's roasting coffee, the earthy breath of 10,000 orchid blooms, and the faint, regal musk of Nero Wolfe himself. I, Archie Goodwin, occupied the desk nearest the front window, where the afternoon light slanted through Venetian blinds and striped the floor like a prison yard. My job description, if anyone ever bothered to write it down, read, "Keep Wolfe fed, solvent, and supplied with criminals interesting enough to justify leaving his chair." On this particular Tuesday, the criminals were late, and I was reduced to balancing the household accounts while the Remington sulked beside me. Upstairs, in the plant rooms on the roof, Wolfe was communing with his darlings. Phalaenopsis glowing like moonlight on velvet, Cattleya heavy with perfume, and the new hybrid he had named Nero Wolfe Invictus, a bloom so arrogant it refused to open for anyone but him. He would remain among them until the clock in the office struck 6, at which point he would descend, bathe, dress, and consume whatever masterpiece Fritz had conjured. Only then would he consent to earn the 40,000 a year he considered a modest stipend for genius. At 6:03, the doorbell rang, 3 short, 1 long, our private signal for client in distress, possibly solvent. I laid down the account book, adjusted the knot in my tie, a shade of maroon that Wolfe claimed offended his retinas, and strode to the front hall. Footsteps on hardwood, deliberate and unhurried. Through the one-way glass I saw a woman who looked as though she had stepped out of a Vogue cover and straight into a nightmare. Emerald silk dress cut on the bias, sable coat slipping off one shoulder, hat pinned at a precarious angle that cost more than my monthly salary. Her face was pale beneath the perfect makeup, and her gloved hands clutched a beaded purse as if it were the only solid thing left in the world. I opened the door. "Mr. Goodwin." Her voice trembled, but the diction was Park Avenue pure. "I must see Mr. Nero Wolfe. Immediately. It is—" She glanced over her shoulder at the empty street. "It is a matter of life and death." I gave her the standard smile, friendly, non-committal, with just enough steel to remind visitors that this was not a charity ward. "Life and death are our specialty, Mrs. Hargrove, Mrs. Jonathan Hargrove." The name struck a chord. Jonathan Hargrove had died the previous year, when his Packard took a dive off the Merritt Parkway. Officially an accident, unofficially whispered to be suicide after a forgery scandal threatened his gallery. The widow had inherited everything: steel mills in Pittsburgh, a mansion on Sutton Place, and the Velvet Atrium, Madison Avenue's most exclusive art salon. "Come in, Mrs. Hargrove. Mr. Wolfe will be down in 9 minutes. May I take your coat?" She hesitated as though surrendering the sable might leave her naked to whatever pursued her. Then she stepped across the threshold, and the scent of gardenias and fear followed her into the hall. Coat rustles, heels click on marble. I hung the sable in the closet, noting the label, Réveillon Frère, price tag equivalent to a year's rent on a Greenwich Village studio. I ushered her into the office, the big front room with the globe, the custom chair built to Wolfe's exact specifications, and the walls of books that rose like cliffs of yellow-brown and crimson. Sit here. I indicated the red leather chair that faced Wolfe's desk, at an angle calculated to make visitors feel simultaneously honoured and interrogated. Coffee? Brandy? Cigarette? She shook her head, perching on the edge of the chair as though ready to bolt. Her eyes, green, wide, expensive, darted to the door, the windows, the hallway. I took my own seat, opened a fresh pack of Luckies, and waited. Experience had taught me that silence is the sharpest prod. Match strike, inhale. At 6:12 exactly, the elevator hummed, descended, and sighed open. Nero Wolfe emerged, vast and majestic in a fresh yellow shirt that could have tented a circus. His cheeks were shaved to baby smoothness, his hair parted with geometric precision. He crossed the room in 7 measured steps, lowered himself into the chair that groaned like an old friend, and fixed Mrs. Hargrove with a stare that had made hardened racketeers reconsider their life choices. "Madam," he rumbled, voice deep enough to vibrate the decanters on the sideboard, "I dislike hysteria, and I abhor tardiness. You have interrupted my evening schedule by 4 minutes. State your business with brevity and precision, or leave." Mrs. Hargrove swallowed once, twice. Then the words tumbled out like pearls from a broken string. "Mr. Wolfe, tonight at 9 o'clock, the Velvet Atrium hosts a private auction, invitation only. A single painting will be offered, Woman Descending the Staircase in Vermilion, by Victor Lang, lavish. It is expected to fetch $250,000. She drew a trembling breath. "This morning I received this." She opened the beaded, pursed, and extracted a single sheet of heavy cream paper folded twice. I rose, took it from her gloved fingers, and carried it to Wolfe. He unfolded it with the delicacy he reserved for orchid petals. The message was typed in pica on a machine I could already tell was an Underwood No. 5, common as dirt, untraceable, no signature, only 7 words centered on the page. "The atrium will run red at 9. Below the words someone had drawn a crude dagger, dripping 3 drops of crimson ink that looked disturbingly like blood. Wolfe's lips pursed, an expression that on lesser men would have been a whistle. He turned the paper over, sniffed it, yes, sniffed, and handed it to me. "Archie, observations." I took my time. Paper, Crane's Kid finish, expensive but available at any good stationer. Ink, standard Parker Quink, red. Margins perfect, no indentations, typed by someone who knew machines. And the scent, a ghost of gardenia, same as Mrs. Hargrove's perfume. Either she had handled it extensively, or the sender shared her taste. "Typed within the last 48 hours, I said. "The paper hasn't yellowed. The threat is specific to time and place. Someone wants to stop the auction, or scare off the buyers." Wolfe leaned back, fingers interlaced over his middle mound. "Mrs. Hargrove, why come to me rather than the police?" Her laugh was brittle. "The police? Inspector Kramer still believes my husband's death was accident. If I show them this, they will close the gallery for weeks. The painting will be withdrawn, my creditors will devour me, and the scandal we'll finish what Jonathan began." She leaned forward, eyes blazing now. "I need discretion, Mr. Wolfe, and I need the auction to proceed. Find who sent this tonight, and I will pay your usual fee plus a bonus of $10,000. Wolfe's eyes narrowed to slits. Money talks, and 10,000 extra verses sang. But art, now that was the siren song. Victor Lang was the recluse of the moment, a painter who had emerged from nowhere after the war, producing canvases that made critics weep and collectors mortgage their souls. Wolfe had once called his work calculated hysteria on linen, which in Wolfe speak was high praise. He sighed, a sound like a bellows. "Very well. Archie and I will attend your auction. We will arrive separately, he at 8:30, I at 8:55. You will introduce me as a prospective buyer from Montreal. Archie will be my secretary. You will say nothing of this note to anyone. Is that clear?" Mrs. Hargrove nodded, relief flooding her face. "Thank you. Oh, thank you." Wolfe waved a hand the size of a ham. "Fritz will serve dinner in 20 minutes. You will remain here until 8:15. The street may be watched. Archie, show Mrs. Hargrove the front room and bring me the Evening Post." As I led her down the hall, she clutched my arm. "Mr. Goodwin, do you believe in curses?" I grinned. "Only the ones people pay to have lifted." She did not smile back. Dinner was roast pheasant with morels, risotto perfumed with white truffle, and a bottle of 29 Montrachet that made Wolfe close his eyes in ecstasy. Mrs. Hargrove picked at her plate like a bird with a broken wing. I ate enough for two and memorized every tremor in her hands. At 8:15, I tucked her into a cab on 9th Avenue, 3 blocks away. At 8:29, I slipped into a dinner jacket and caught another cab to Madison and 62nd. At 8:55 exactly, Nero Wolfe would arrive in the armoured Cadillac driven by our sometime chauffeur, Herbert, looking every inch the Canadian millionaire who collected art the way other men collected parking tickets. The Velvet Atrium awaited, crimson draperies, crystal chandeliers, and somewhere in its elegant guts, a clock ticking down to 9. Dear listener, the board is set. The pieces glide into place. The widow in emerald, the genius in yellow, the legman in maroon. Somewhere in that velvet darkness, a dagger drips ink instead of blood. For now, who sent the note? Who profits if the auction fails? And what secret is worth killing for at 9 o'clock sharp? Pause the recording here if you must, but do not wander far. The atrium doors are about to open, and the first scream is only minutes away. Chapter 2. Shadows Among the Masterpieces. The Velvet Atrium crouched between a discreet jeweller and a shuttered couturier, like a scarlet secret. Its facade was black marble shot through with gold veins. Above the bronze doors, a single spotlight illuminated a bas-relief of Venus, rising from a paintbrush instead of a shell. A liveried doorman, 6'3", shoulders like bridge pilings, checked my invitation with the solemnity of a papal envoy. Name on the card, Mr. Archibald McNair, private secretary to Monsieur Nicolas Legrand of Montreal. Wolfe's French was flawless when he bothered, but tonight he would speak only in slow, accented English, thick enough to butter toast. I slipped the doorman a 5-spot anyway. Old habits. Inside, the air was warmer than the October night had any right to be, thick with lilies, Russian cigarettes, and the metallic tang of too much money in one room. Crimson velvet swallowed sound, the way deep water swallows light. Chandeliers of bohemian crystal dripped frozen fire onto Persian rugs, worth more than the annual budget of Luxembourg. Along the walls hung the evening's lesser offerings. A small Matisse still life that glowed like a coal, a Modigliani neck longer than regret, and a Kandinsky that looked as though someone had sneezed primary colours onto canvas. At the far end, raised on a dais beneath a spotlight fierce enough to interrogate spies, stood the star of the night, Woman Descending the Staircase in Vermilion by Victor Lang, 6 feet by 4, oil on linen, 1944. A single figure fractured into crimson shards tumbling down an invisible staircase. Critics called it dynamite wrapped in silk. Collectors called it $250,000 minimum. I drifted through the crowd, cataloguing faces the way Wolfe catalogues orchid hybrids. Soft murmur of voices rises, clinking glasses, cultured laughter. First Reginald Thorpe, collector, speculator, and professional cad. Pencil moustache waxed to bayonet points, white tie gleaming like fresh ice. He stood beneath the Lang, drink in hand, staring up with the expression of a man who has just discovered termites in his vault. Thorpe had bid on every major post-war painting and lost them all to higher pockets. Rumour said he was leveraged to the eyebrows. I caught his eye. He gave me the nod of one predator recognizing another. Next, Miss Lydia Voss, 26, bobbed hair black as wet ink, dressed the colour of absinthe. She was Jonathan Hargrove's niece by marriage, and the only person in the room who looked as though she belonged in 1925 instead of 1945. Lydia painted in the style of the Ashcan school, but with knives instead of brushes. Violent, lovely things that galleries refuse to hang. She hovered near her aunt, fingers twitching as though she wanted to slash the Lang right off its stretcher. Dr. Elias Crowe, the gallery's appraiser, fluttered between them like a moth in a killing jar. Round spectacles, ink on his cuffs, a tic that made his left eyelid flutter every 7 seconds. Yes, I timed it. Crowe carried a leather folio stuffed with provenance papers, and the faint smell of forgery glue. He kept glancing at the Lang as though it might sprout fangs. And Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove herself, our client, glittering in the emerald silk again, this time with diamonds at her throat bright enough to signal ships. She floated from group to group, smile pinned in place, but her eyes kept sliding to the clock above the dais. 8:41, I found a shadowed corner beside a bronze Rodin and lit a cigarette, letting the smoke veil me. At 8:55 exactly, the bronze doors opened again and the room inhaled. Nero Wolfe entered like a battleship sliding into harbour. Yellow waistcoat tonight, cutaway coat, Malacca cane with a gold head shaped like a wolf. Every head turned. Conversation dropped to a respectful murmur. Mrs. Hargrove glided forward, took his arm with practised grace. "Monsieur Legrand, how marvellous you could come!" She pronounced it Legrand, rolling the R like a purr. Wolfe inclined his head a regal quarter-inch. "Madame, the pleasure is mine." His accent was Quebec via Mars. I stubbed the cigarette and moved closer, playing the dutiful secretary. Wolfe's eyes flicked over the room once, slow, comprehensive, merciless, then settled on the Lang. For a moment, the genius and the painting regarded each other like duelists choosing weapons. At 8:58, the lights dimmed by half. A spotlight tightened on the dais. Mrs. Hargrove ascended 3 velvet steps, tapped a small crystal microphone that chimed like a bell. "Distinguished guests, collectors, connoisseurs, tonight we offer a once-in-a-lifetime shoe opportunity. Victor Lang regrets he could not be present, his health you understand, but he has entrusted us with his masterpiece. Bidding will commence at $200,000. May I have an opening?" She never finished. A scream, raw, animal, ripped through the gallery. The spotlight swung wildly, found the source. Beneath the Lang, sprawled across the dais like a discarded marionette, lay a man in evening dress. White tie soaked crimson, a palette knife, 12-inch blade, ivory handle, buried to the hilt just left of the sternum. Blood pooled thick and shining on the black marble, reflecting the chandelier in scarlet shards. Victor Lang himself, dead, at 8:59. Pandemonium erupts, shouts, running feet. I vaulted the velvet rope, shoved through silk and tuxedos. Wolfe was already there, massive and calm, kneeling with surprising grace. He touched 2 fingers to Lang's carotid, then examined the knife without disturbing it. "Archie," he said, voice cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. "Note the angle. Upward thrust, left-handed, considerable strength. Time of death, less than 2 minutes. The killer is still in this room." Mrs. Hargrove stood frozen on the dais steps. One gloved hand pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were huge, reflecting the blood like green mirrors. Inspector Kramer shouldered through the bronze doors at that moment, cigar glowing like a furious coal. Plainclothes men fanned out. Uniforms sealed exits. "Wolfe!" Kramer roared. "What the hell are you doing in my crime scene?" Wolfe rose, brushing imaginary dust from his knees. "Observing, Inspector. A privilege you frequently deny me. The weapon is Lang's own. Note the monogram on the handle. Wiped clean of prints, I wager. And observe," he pointed with the cane, "a single set of bloody footprints leading from the body to the service corridor, size 10, Florsheim wingtips, right heel worn. Yet the corridor door is locked from the inside. Curious." Kramer chewed his cigar to pulp. "Lock the room! Nobody leaves!" I moved fast, cataloguing before the herd trampled evidence. Clue 1, the torn scrap clenched in Lang's dead fist. Corner of heavy cream paper, same stock as the threat note. Visible letters, Forge. Clue 2, a single gardenia petal, crushed and bloody beneath the body. Clue 3, on the dais edge, a smudge of vermilion oil paint, fresh, still wet. I slipped the petal into an envelope when no one watched. Wolfe caught my eye, gave the tiniest nod. Reginald Thorpe stood pale as parchment, drink trembling in his hand. Lydia Voss had backed against a tapestry, green dress suddenly the colour of illness. Dr. Crow's eyelid was fluttering like a trapped moth. He clutched his folio so tightly the leather split. And Mrs. Hargrove, our client, stared at the corpse as though it were a ghost she had summoned herself. Pause, 5 seconds, heartbeat drum under. Dear listener, freeze the frame. Velvet Atrium has run red at 9, exactly as promised. A genius lies dead beneath his own masterpiece, a knife in his heart and a word fragment in his fist. 4 suspects circle like sharks in evening dress, and every exit is sealed. Who struck the blow? Who benefits from a corpse on the auction block? And why does the scent of gardenias cling to murder? Take a breath. Light another cigarette if you must. Because the footprints lead nowhere, the door was locked from within. And somewhere in this velvet cage, the killer is watching us watch them. The game, as Wolfe would say, is afoot, and the next move may be bloodier still. Chapter 3. Orchids and Interrogations. The brownstone on West 35th Street had never felt so much like a fortress. It was 2:30 in the morning, and the city outside was drunk on victory and cheap gin. But inside our walls, the only intoxication was adrenaline and the faint perfume of 10,000 orchids breathing overhead. Nero Wolfe sat in his custom throne, yellow silk pyjamas stretched to diplomatic limits, a schooner of Remmer's beer in one hand and the torn scrap of cream paper in the other. He had not spoken since we left the Velvet Atrium. That was a bad sign. Silence in Wolfe was either digestion or detonation. I paced the office rug, Persian, 14th century, and now bearing the permanent imprint of my Florsheim's, while Fritz moved like a worried ghost, refilling Wolfe's glass before it ever reached half empty. On the desk lay the evening's harvest. Wolfe finally spoke, voice rolling out like thunder over the Hudson. "Archie, the fact is all of them. Begin with the moment the lights dimmed." I lit a lucky, inhaled, and gave him the play-by-play in the clipped shorthand we had perfected over 10 years of corpses and alibis. 8:58:05, Mrs. Hargrove taps microphone. 8:58:17, spotlight narrows to a 6-foot circle. 8:58:29, single scream female from the dais direction. 8:58:34, general lights come up 1/3, pandemonium. 8:58:51, I reach the body. Temperature of skin still 98 degrees, blood still flowing. Death between 8:57:50 and 8:58:30. 30-second window. Wolfe's eyes narrowed to slits, during which every soul in the room claims to have been staring at the painting or at Mrs. Hargrove. Convenient. Continue. I tapped ash into the tray shaped like a catalier. Footprints, right heel, worn distinctly, 3/16 of an inch lower than left. Florsheim Imperial, size 10, less than 6 months old. Trail begins at the body, crosses dais, descends 2 steps, turns left into service corridor. Corridor door locked, key on the inside, no exit, yet no second set of prints returning. Wolfe drank half the schooner in one pull. Ergo, the killer either flew, walked backward in the same prints, or never left the dais. The first is impossible, the second improbable, the third. He set the glass down with a click that silenced the clock, illuminating. He steepled his fingers. "Archie, tomorrow you will pursue 3 lines of inquiry. First, Reginald Thorpe. Discover why a man who lost $300,000 at Saratoga in August suddenly has cash to bid $250,000 on a painting he publicly despised. Second, Lydia Voss. Her studio lease is 3 months in arrears. Her dealer dropped her last spring, yet she wore a dress tonight that cost more than her annual income. Third, Dr. Elias Crowe. His appraisal of the Lang was the linchpin of the auction. If it is fraudulent, he is ruined. If Lang exposed him, he is desperate." He paused, eyes glinting. And fourth, he lifted the gardenia petal to the light. "Discover who besides Mrs. Hargrove wears gardenia perfume so extravagantly that a single petal carries the scent across a roomful of corpses." I crushed out the cigarette. 4 lines, 4 suspects, 1 night. You're enjoying this. Phooey. But the corners of his mouth twitched, the Wolfe equivalent of a belly laugh. By 4:30 I had showered, changed into a fresh suit the colour of gunmetal, and swallowed 2 cups of Fritz's coffee strong enough to float a battleship. Wolfe had retired to the plant rooms with the threat note and a magnifying lens. I took the elevator to the roof, found him among the cataliers, bathed in the pink glow of grow lights. He did not look up. "The paper is Crane's, as we knew, but observe—" He held the torn scrap under the lens. "The tear is not random. It follows the grain, yet the angle is wrong for a hurried rip. Someone tore it deliberately to leave the fragment. Forge. in Lang's hand. A message or misdirection. I leaned closer. The torn edge was almost surgical. Staged? Undeniably. Now go. Bring me facts before noon, or I shall be compelled to leave this house. An indignity I refuse to endure twice in 1 week. Roof door closes. Elevator hums downward. Line 1. Reginald Thorpe. His penthouse on Park and 70th occupied the entire 23rd floor and smelled of Havana cigars and old money dying of loneliness. The butler tried to stonewall me. A $20 bill and the mention of homicide loosened his tongue. Thorpe was in the library, bathrobe over pyjamas, scotch in hand, eyes redder than the vermilion on Lang's canvas. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Lang was a fraud, Goodwin. A talented fraud, but a fraud. That painting? I had it examined last month by René Drouet in Paris. Before the war, Drouet authenticated half the Louvre. His report, Thorpe crossed to a wall safe, spun the dial, extracted a blue folder. Says the Lang is a 1941 canvas overpainted last year. Signature forged. Pigments wrong. I was going to expose it tonight. Ruin Hargrove. Buy the gallery for pennies. I flipped through the report. Authentic stationery. Drouet's flourish. Postmarked Lisbon, September 12th. But the envelope showed a New York forwarding stamp dated October 8th. Someone had held it for weeks. Why wait until tonight? Thorpe's laugh was bitter. Because I needed the scandal public, and because Victor Lang himself phoned me yesterday and offered to sell me the genuine provenance for 50,000 cash. Blackmail, pure and simple. Time of call? 4:17 p.m. I noted it. Line 2, Lydia Voss. Her studio was a 5th-floor walk-up in Greenwich Village, windows painted black, the air thick with turpentine and despair. She answered the door in a man's shirt streaked with alizarin crimson, eyes swollen from crying, or gin or both. "You're Wolfe's man." Not a question. She stepped aside. Canvases leaned 3 deep against every wall, furious slashes of colour that made Lang's work look like a postcard. I came straight to it. "Where'd the dress come from, Miss Voss?" "The green one. Silk crepe, Paris label, $200 minimum." She lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. "Victor gave it to me last week. Said it matched my eyes when I'm angry." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "We were lovers, Mr. Goodwin, for 8 months. He promised to finance my first show. Then yesterday he laughed and said I painted like a talented child, and that the dress was payment in full." Alibi? Alone in the studio from 6 until she left for the gallery at 8:15. Neighbour heard shouting at 7:30. Male voice. Description: tall, jutted so tall, cultured, impatient. Matched half the men at the auction. Line 3, Dr. Elias Crowe. His office above the gallery reeked of formaldehyde and fear. He was packing files into a steamer trunk when I walked in unannounced. "Dr. Crowe, going somewhere." He jumped so hard his glasses flew off. I have a lecture in Boston tomorrow." "Funny. The auction catalogue lists you as available for post-sale authentication all week." I picked up a file marked Lang Private. Inside, 2 provenance certificates, one dated 1943, pristine, one dated 1944, singed at the edges, ink smudged. The smudged one declared the painting a forgery, signed Elias Crowe. He tried to snatch it back. I held it higher. "Lang found this, didn't he? Threatened to expose you unless you authenticated the fake. How much did he want?" Crowe's eyelid went into overdrive. "Everything. My reputation, my savings, He stopped. "Yesterday afternoon he came here. We argued. He said tonight would be my last chance. Then he left. I swear, I never— Time? 5:05 to 5:27 p.m. No witnesses. Back at the brownstone by 11:30, soaked and buzzing. Wolfe was at his desk, 4 empty beer bottles lined up like soldiers. The threat note lay under the strong lamp. I spilled the hall. Thorpe, motive, revenge and profit, motive strength, high, alibi, alone in penthouse, butler off duty. Phone call from Lang at 4:17. Lydia, motive, betrayal and ruin, alibi, none. Shouting male visitor, 7:30. Crow, motive, professional, annihilation. Opportunity, gallery, all day. Argument with Lang, 5:05 to 5:27. Wolfe listened without moving a muscle. When I finished, he closed his eyes. Archie, the gardenia. I opened the envelope. The petal had darkened further. The scent was fainter but unmistakable. Mrs. Hargrove wears gardenia, yes, but so does someone else, Lydia Voss. The shirt she wore this morning, gardenia, strong enough to notice 10 feet away, and the petal was crushed, not dropped. Someone held it clenched in a fist. Wolfe's eyes snapped open. Telephone, Saul. I dialed Saul Panzer, the best freelance shadow in Manhattan. Saul answered on the second ring, voice like gravel soaked in honey. Saul, Archie, emergency tail, 3 targets starting now, Thorpe, Voss, Crow. I want to know if any of them meet, where and what they say. Double rate. Saul chuckled. Triple if someone tries to kill me. Done. Wolfe leaned back. And now, Archie, we wait, but not idly. He reached for the phone himself, an event rarer than snowfall in July, and dialed a number from memory. Mr. Hewitt, Nero Wolfe, I require your expertise on gardenias, specifically the cultivar Gardenia jasminoids mystery, released 1943, limited stock, scent distinguishable by— He listened, grunted satisfaction. Thank you. He hung up. Lewis Hewitt confirms. Only 400 plants sold on the East Coast. 1 went to the Hargrove estate in 1944. 1 to Victor Lang's greenhouse in Cold Spring. 1 to— He permitted himself a wintry smile. Dr. Elias Crow, for his late wife. The 4th was stolen from the New York Botanical Garden last spring. Guess whose studio window box now sports a flourishing specimen, Mr. Goodwin? I whistled. Lydia Voss. Wolfe drained the last beer. The web tightens, but the spider is still hidden. Dear listener, the rain is hammering the city like accusations. 3 suspects, 3 motives sharp as palette knives, a gardenia petal that carries perfume and lies, and somewhere in this storm, a 4th player moves unseen. Chapter 4. The web tightens. The doorbell rang 3 times, sharp as gunshots. I was already halfway down the stairs, toting 38 in one hand, coffee in the other. Fritz hovered behind me with a cast-iron skillet he swore could fell a bull. Through the one-way glass I saw Saul Panzer, hat dripping, collar turned up, eyes bright as a ferret's. I let him in. Talk fast, Saul. You look like a drowned orchestra conductor. He shook rain across the marble like a dog. Triple rate just paid for itself. Listen close. Saul's report came in bullets. Saul's voice dropped. I figured arson plus insurance fraud equals long vacation in Sing Sing. So I kicked the door, gun out, badge flashing, borrowed from a cop who owes me. They froze. I told them Nero Wolfe wanted a private word. Here, now, or the cops get the whole show at sunrise. Wolfe was waiting in the office, fully dressed, fresh as a daisy that had never heard of murder. 4 chairs faced his desk like a tribunal. Thorpe, Voss, Crow, wet, pale, furious. Mrs. Hargrove arrived 10 minutes later, summoned by Fritz, diamonds replaced by a sensible wool coat and terror in her eyes. Wolfe did not offer seats. He simply began. "You three idiots have just handed me the solution on a silver platter." He lifted the gardenia petal, now pressed between glass slides. "Item, Mr. Thorpe, your Florsheim heels are worn exactly 3/16 on the right, matching the bloody prints. You walked to the dais, stabbed Lang, walked back in the same prints to confuse pursuit. Childish, but effective for 30 seconds. Thorpe opened his mouth. Wolfe steamrolled on. "Item, Miss Voss, you supplied the torn fragment, ripped from the threat note you yourself typed on Mrs. Hargrove's underwood while pretending to help catalogue. You left the gardenia petal clenched in your fist. Your perfume, your flower box, your betrayal." Lydia's gasp was theatrical. "Item, Dr. Crow, you authenticated a forgery for $50,000, then panicked when Lang demanded another 100. You brought kerosene tonight to destroy the evidence. All three of you, greed, jealousy, terror, converged on one corpse." He turned to Mrs. Hargrove, voice softening a fraction. "Madam, your only crime was trusting vipers. The painting is genuine. Lang forged the forgeries. Yes, you heard correctly. He overpainted old canvases, sold them as new, blackmailed the experts who discovered it. Crow's second provenance was real. The first was Lang's lie. Thorpe's Paris report? Lang forged that too, to drive the price higher by creating scandal." Wolfe leaned back. The locked door? Lang himself locked it at 8:57, planning to reveal the forgery scandal after the sale, ruining his enemies in one stroke. He did not expect three of them to act together. Thorpe struck first, left-handed, as the wound shows. Lydia planted the note fragment. Crow wiped the knife. A conspiracy of amateurs. Silence thick enough to chew. Inspector Kramer burst in at that moment, cigar unlit, warrant in hand. Saul had tipped him the address. "Wolfe, you fat genius!" he growled, almost affectionate. "Arrest them all?" "Indeed." Handcuffs clicked. Lydia wept. Thorpe cursed. Crow simply folded like wet paper. Mrs. Hargrove found her voice. "The painting? Yours, madam, and worth every penny. Lang's death turns it into legend. You will be solvent by noon." Wolfe waved a dismissive hand. "Archie, see them out. Fritz, breakfast. I have orchids to attend." Dear listener, the atrium's velvet shadows have lifted. 3 killers, 1 knife, 0 genius among them. The painting hangs safe. The widow weeps with relief. And Nero Wolfe returns to his orchids richer by $10,000 and one solved puzzle. Pause now. Raise a glass to locked rooms that unlock themselves, to gardenias that betray, and to the 7th of a ton genius who never left his chair. The case is closed. The orchids bloom, and somewhere in Manhattan, another doorbell is already waiting to ring. Chapter 5. Revelation in the Brownstone. 10 o'clock the same morning. The brownstone smelled of victory, coffee, bacon, and the faint ghost of gardenia that would never quite leave the red leather chair. Nero Wolfe sat behind his desk like a satisfied emperor. Yellow waistcoat unbuttoned one discreet notch. A fresh Cattleya hybrid pinned to his lapel. Deep vermilion, the exact shade of the blood that had ruined Mrs. Hargrove's marble. Inspector Kramer occupied the chair usually reserved for clients. Hat on his knee. Cigar unlit out of respect for the orchids. Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove perched opposite, eyes bright with something between gratitude and disbelief. Saul Panzer leaned against the bookshelves, arms folded, modest as a cat who's delivered 3 mice in one night. Wolfe lifted a sheet of heavy cream paper, identical to the threat note, and laid it beside the torn fragment we had pried from Lang's dead fingers. "Observe, Inspector, the tear aligns perfectly. The missing portion reads, "A sentence Lang himself typed yesterday afternoon, intending to send it to Mrs. Hargrove after the auction, revealing Thorpe, Voss, and Crow as his blackmail victims. He signed his own death warrant with those 7 words," Kramer grunted. "So the 3 stooges panicked and killed him together?" "Precisely. A spontaneous conspiracy born of terror. Thorpe carried the knife. He had threatened Lang with it weeks ago over an unpaid gambling debt. Lydia Voss tore the note to leave the fragment forge, hoping to point suspicion at forgery rather than murder. Crow wiped the blade and suggested the footprint trick, having read it in a detective story he reviewed for the Herald Tribune. Wolfe sipped coffee, pinky extended like a battle standard. The locked door was Lang's own flourish. He locked it at 8:57 to create drama for his revelation speech. He did not know his victims had followed him onto the dais through the velvet curtain at the rear, an old stage trick from the gallery's days as a speakeasy theatre. Thorpe struck her from behind. Lydia crushed the gardenia petal in her fist. Nerves. Crow, ever the technician, tried to erase evidence with his handkerchief, transferring vermilion oil from Lang's cuff to the dais edge. "Amateurs, Inspector. Brilliant amateurs, but amateurs." Mrs. Hargrove found her voice. "And the painting? Is it genuine?" Wolfe permitted himself a small, regal smile. "Entirely. Lang's forgeries were the earlier works he sold to European refugees, desperate people who needed cash more than authenticity. Woman descending the staircase in vermilion is the only canvas he painted honestly. Its value has tripled overnight. By tomorrow, you will refuse $500,000. She pressed a gloved hand to her lips. Tears, threatening the perfect makeup. Kramer rose, hat in hand. "Paperwork's done. The 3 of them are singing different tunes in 3 different keys, enough to hang them all. Wolfe," he hesitated, then extended a grudging hand. "Good work." Wolfe took it without rising. "Acceptable work, Inspector." The orchids were restless. Kramer snorted and left, footsteps echoing down the hall like a retreating army. When the door closed, Mrs. Hargrove opened her purse and produced a check, $10,000 signed with a flourish. She laid it beside the vermilion cattleya. "For services rendered," she whispered, "and for giving me back my life." Wolfe inclined his head. "Madam, justice is its own reward. The bonus merely oils the wheels." She laughed then, actually laughed, and the sound was bright as the chandelier that had witnessed murder. After she left, Saul collected his triple fee and vanished into the city like smoke. Fritz served lunch, Chadreau soufflé, fresh asparagus, and a Montrachet 29 that made Wolfe close his eyes in reverence. Between bites he spoke almost dreamily. "Archie, file the papers under conspiracy, amateur, fatal. And remind me never again to attend an auction. The chairs are uniformly abominable." I grinned. "Yes, sir, though you did look magnificent pretending to be Canadian." "Pfui." The check went into the safe. The gardenia petal went into the wastebasket, finally scentless. Upstairs, 10,000 orchids bloomed in perfect rows, innocent of human treachery. Soft fade, the office clock ticks, pages turn, a beer bottle opens with a satisfying hiss. Dear listener, the Velvet Atrium will reopen next week under new management, Mrs. Hargroves, solvent and triumphant. The Lang painting now hangs in the Met on permanent loan, titled Simply Descent into Legend. 3 murderers await trial in the tombs, still blaming one another. and in a quiet brownstone on West 35th Street, a genius weighs 1/7 of a ton, drinks beer at body temperature, and tends flowers that never betray him. Chapter 6. The Second Corpse, 3 weeks later, November 10th, 1945. The city had moved on. Front pages now screamed about Truman, Nuremberg, and the new atom bomb tests in the Pacific. The Velvet Atrium murder was yesterday's scandal. 3 killers safely locked in the tombs, the painting insured for $500,000, Mrs. Hargrove photographed smiling beside it at the Met. Nero Wolfe had declared the case closed, cashed the check, and retreated into a sulk of orchids and beer. I thought we were done. The doorbell rang at 2:17 a.m. I was in the office reconciling October receipts when the chimes cut through the house like a scalpel. 3 short, 1 long, our emergency signal. I reached the front hall with the .38 already in my hand. Through the glass, Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove, soaked to the skin, sable coat hanging open, hair plastered to her skull. Her face was the colour of old ash. I yanked the door open. "Get me inside," she rasped. "They're dead, both of them, and it's the same knife." Wolfe met us in the office, bathrobe the size of a circus tent, eyes glittering like wet obsidian. Fritz hovered with brandy and towels. "Talk," Wolfe commanded. Mrs. Hargrove's voice cracked like thin ice. "Tonight, private viewing at the gallery, just 4 of us. Me, the insurance adjuster Mr. Halverson, the new curator Miss Pierce, and Victor Lang's brother, Anton Lang. He flew in from Zurich yesterday. Claimed he had papers proving the painting was still a forgery. Demanded $250,000 or he'd sue." She swallowed brandy, coughed. "We met in the atrium at midnight. The Lang painting was back on the dais for reappraisal. Anton brought the same palette knife. Said it was sentimental, the twin of the murder weapon. Ivory handle, monogram VL. He laid it beside the canvas like a challenge." Her hands shook so hard the glass rattled. "Lights dimmed for the spotlight effect. 1 scream. When the floods came up, Anton was slumped across the painting, the knife in his heart. Exact same angle, exact same wound. Then Halverson dropped. Single gunshot, small caliber, through the temple. No gun found. Miss Pierce and I were the only ones left standing. We ran." Wolfe's lips pursed. "Locked room again. Every door bolted from inside. Windows barred. Alarm wired. Police are there now. Kramer's tearing his hair out." Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, the car. Herbert on call. Since 1918. We were rolling up Madison Avenue by 243, Mrs. Hargrove between us clutching the brandy flask like a rosary. The Velvet Atrium glowed under police floodlights. Kramer met us at the bronze doors, face purple. "2 bodies, Wolfe. Same stage, same spotlight, same damned knife. Except this one's got a twin brother. And no prints, no gun, no exit. You told me this case was closed." Wolfe swept past him. "It was. This is a postscript." The scene was a nightmare in crimson. Anton Lang, taller, thinner, same hawk nose as Victor, lay draped over the painting, blood cascading down the vermilion shards like fresh paint. The palette knife stood upright in his chest, ivory handle gleaming. 10 feet away, Halverson sat upright in a gilt chair, neat black hole above his right ear, brains decorating a Modigliani behind him. Wolfe examined without touching. Knife thrust identical, left-handed upward, but observe, Anton's wound is 2 inches higher. He was standing on the dais step when struck. Halverson shot with a .25 automatic, silenced probably. Powder burns indicate muzzle contact. He sniffed the air. "Gardenia, fresh," Mrs. Hargrove swayed. Miss Pierce wears gardenia. She was Victor's mistress before Lydia. Anton brought proof she helped forge the European certificates. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Where is Miss Pierce? Kramer jerked a thumb. Back office. Hysterical. Claims she saw nothing. Lights went down, lights came up. 2 dead men. Wolfe moved to the dais, studied the velvet curtain at the rear, the same curtain the 3 amateurs had used 3 weeks ago. Fresh tear at eye level. He parted it. Behind, a narrow catwalk once used for speakeasy musicians. A .25 Beretta lay on the boards, silencer attached. 1 shot fired. Beside it, a single gardenia bloom, crushed. Wolfe's voice was soft thunder. Archie, the footprints. I checked. Same floor-time wear pattern, right heel. But impossible. Thorpe was in the tombs. Wolfe turned to Kramer. Inspector, arrest Miss Pierce for both murders. Motive. Anton Lang had proof she forged the Zurich certificates that started Victor's blackmail empire. She killed Victor 3 weeks ago, alone. The 3 amateurs stumbled onto the body after she had fled through the catwalk. They panicked, staged the footprints, planted the note fragment, thinking to share blame. Tonight she returned to silence the last witness. He lifted the gardenia. She wore the same perfume, used the same knife, kept as a trophy, shot Halverson to eliminate an honest adjuster. The locked room she never left. Hid on the catwalk, struck when the lights dimmed, descended, posed the bodies, ascended again. Police arrived before she could escape. Kramer stared, then bellowed for sergeants. Miss Pierce, 28, blonde, ice-blue eyes, was dragged out screaming denials. Gardenia scent clung to her like guilt. Mrs. Hargrove wept silently. Wolfe faced her. Madam, your painting is genuine. Your nightmare ends tonight. Go home. We left at dawn. The rain had stopped. Steam rose from the streets like ghosts departing. Back in the brownstone, Wolfe drank milk, and stared at the vermilion cataleya. Archie, file under encore. Unnecessary but satisfying. And remind me, never trust a woman who wears gardenia after midnight. I laughed all the way to bed. Dear listener, the atrium is finally silent. 2 brothers, 5 corpses, 1 knife, 0 forgiveness. The painting hangs in the Met, insured for $1 million now. And in a quiet brownstone, a genius tends orchids that never kill. Case closed, twice, sleep well, the doorbell will not ring again. Chapter 7. The Gardenia Ledger. I found Wolfe among the Phalaenopsis. Barefoot in yellow pajamas, holding a gardenia plant as though it had personally insulted him. The pot was wrapped in brown paper, marked Cold Spring Nursery, property of V. Lang. A police evidence tag dangled from one leaf like a death sentence. He did not look up when I entered. Archie, the ledger. He thrust a small black oilcloth book at me. Inside, neat columns of dates, initials, dollar amounts. Gardenia perfume rose from every page. Every payment traced to forged provenance certificates sold to desperate European collectors fleeing the Nazis. The gardenia was Lang's signature, pressed between pages as a reminder. I own you. He turned the final page. A fresh entry, dated yesterday, ink still blue-black. 11 Nov, 1945, E.H. $100,000 or painting destroyed. E.H. Evelyn Hargrove. I felt the floor tilt. Mrs. Hargrove was next. Wolfe crushed a gardenia bloom in his fist. She was the crown jewel. Lang planned to bleed her for $1 million once the painting hit the Met. Anton flew in to collect the first installment. Miss Pierce killed them both to keep the secret buried, but she missed this. He tapped the ledger. Found in Anton's coat lining. the one piece she could not dredge from the catwalk. I stared at the crushed flower. White petals, crimson veins, like the painting. Wolfe's eyes glittered. "Archie, telephone Kramer. Tell him to hold Miss Pierce incommunicado. Then telephone Mrs. Hargrove. She will come here, now." She arrived at 4:47 a.m., face bare of makeup, eyes hollow. The emerald silk was gone. She wore a simple black dress that made her look suddenly young and breakable. Wolfe did not offer a chair. "Madam, you received a demand yesterday. $100,000, or the painting would be destroyed. You paid?" She nodded once. $50,000 in cash, hidden in the frame's false backing. Anton collected it at midnight, just before her voice broke. He said it was the first of 10 installments. He laughed, said Victor had taught him well. Wolfe opened the ledger to the final page. "Your initials, your ruin." Miss Pierce knew. She killed to protect the secret and to inherit the list. With both Langs dead, she would own the surviving victims. Crow, Thorpe, Voss, already broken. You, next. Mrs. Hargrove sank into the red leather chair as though her bones had dissolved. Wolfe continued, relentless. "But you, madam, are innocent of everything except fear. The painting is clean. Your husband's suicide was genuine. Guilt over buying one forged Lang in 1941. You inherited only the gallery, never the crime. Miss Pierce forged the later certificates alone after Victor seduced her in Zurich." He closed the ledger with a snap. "This ends tonight. The ledger goes to the district attorney. Miss Pierce will hang. 4 murders now. Victor, Anton, Halverson, and an attempted 5th on you. The 3 amateurs in the tombs will be released by noon. Their conspiracy was after the fact, not before. They merely stumbled over a corpse and tried to share the blame." Mrs. Hargrove lifted her head. "And the painting?" Wolfe permitted himself a winter sunrise of a smile. "Yours, free of every shadow. Donate it to the Met, keep it, sell it, your choice, but never wear gardenia again." She laughed then, shaky but real. First light creeps through the skylight, turning 10,000 orchids gold. At 6:00 a.m., Kramer arrived, took the ledger, and actually saluted. By 7, the wires were burning. Miss Pierce confesses all. Gardenia killer unmasked. By 8, Fritz served breakfast, eggs in tarragon, brioche, and a single perfect gardenia floating in a crystal bowl. White, scentless, harmless. Wolfe raised his glass of orange juice. "To finality, Archie, and to orchids that never blackmail." I drank. Dear listener, the Velvet Atrium is shuttered for good. The painting, now titled Woman Descending Forever, hangs in the Met beside a small brass plate. Gift of Evelyn Hargrove, in memory of mistakes forgiven. 5 corpses, 1 ledger, 0 gardenias left alive in Manhattan. The doorbell will not ring again. Chapter 8. The Last Gardenia, a grey Monday chosen by the city for burying its scandals. The funeral of Victor and Anton Lang, double casket, single plot, was held at Woodlawn under a sky the colour of old pewter. No press allowed, only 6 mourners. Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove in deepest black veil, Inspector Kramer chewing an unlit cigar, Saul Panzer in a respectable Homburg, Fritz with a single white camellia, and Nero Wolfe. Wolfe, in the open air, in a cemetery, in November. I nearly dropped the umbrella. He stood at the graveside like a granite monument wrapped in cashmere, yellow scarf brilliant against the gloom. His breath plumed in the cold. When the minister intoned ashes to ashes, Wolfe's lips moved, silent, private. I caught only one word. Pfui. After the coffins descended, Mrs. Hargrove approached, veil lifted. Her eyes were clear for the first time since October. "Mr. Wolfe, I came to say goodbye, and to give you this." She pressed a small velvet box into his gloved hand. Inside, a single gardenia corsage, fresh, perfect, wrapped in silver ribbon. A card in her handwriting, for the man who killed the scent. Wolfe stared at it as though it might explode. "Madam, I do not wear flowers from murder scenes." "It's from my greenhouse," she said softly. "The last plant. I burned the rest this morning. Gardenias are done in Manhattan." She kissed his cheek, actually kissed the great man, and walked away between the headstones. Kramer sidled up, grinning around the cigar. "Sentimental in your old age, huh?" Wolfe's glare could have frozen the Hudson. "Inspector, sentiment is indigestion of the soul. I suffer neither." But he kept the corsage. Carriage wheels on gravel. Fade to the brownstone, fire crackling. Back on West 35th by noon, Wolfe went straight to the plant rooms. I followed with the corsage box. He stood before the staging bench, 10,000 orchids glowing like stained glass. In the centre, one empty black pot, label still reading G. jasminoides, mystery. He placed the corsage inside, exactly centred. Then he did something I had never seen in 12 years. He spoke to a plant. "You were beautiful," he told the empty pot, "and poisonous, like certain women, like certain men, like genius that mistakes itself for God." He turned to me. "Archie, prune the entire intermediate house. Move the cattleyas forward. We begin a new hybrid today. Name, Nero Wolfe. Absolution. Colour, pure white. Scent, none." I swallowed. "Yes, sir." He paused at the door. "And burn that ribbon. Silver reminds me of handcuffs." Rubber gloves snap. Scissors snip. Fade to evening. 7 p.m. The office smelled of roast duck and burgundy. Fritz had outdone himself. Celebration or exorcism, I wasn't sure. Wolfe raised his glass. "To closed circles, Archie. To debts paid in full. To the end of gardenias." I drank. The phone rang. Once, twice. I reached for it out of habit. Wolfe's hand covered mine. "Let it ring." It rang 6 times, then stopped. We never learned who called. Maybe a new client. Maybe a wrong number. Maybe the city itself, checking if we were still open for murder. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. "Tomorrow," he said, "we return to routine. Orchids at 9, breakfast at 8:10, no visitors before 11, no corpses before lunch." I grinned. "And if someone brings gardenias?" He opened his desk drawer, removed the silver ribbon, already burned to ash, and let the grey dust drift into the wastebasket. Chapter 9. The White Orchid Opening. Exactly 1 year since the last gardenia died. The brownstone on West 35th Street smelled of pine boughs, cinnamon, and something new. A clean, almost crystalline fragrance that had nothing to do with perfume and everything to do with triumph. At 9 a.m., sharp, Nero Wolfe stood in the plant rooms beneath a skylight glazed with snow, holding a single bloom the size of a teacup. Pure white lip, pure white petals, throat marked with a single crimson dot, like a drop of blood forgiven. Nero Wolfe Absolution, first public flowering. Lewis Hewitt, Horace Parker, and a dozen other orchid aristocrats crowded the aisles in galoshes and mink, murmuring Latin names like prayers. Reporters from Life, The Times, and the Herald Tribune scribbled furiously. Flashbulbs popped like champagne corks. Wolfe's voice carried without effort. "Gentlemen, ladies, absolution is thornless, scentless, and impervious to every blight known to man. It required 14,000 crosses, 1 ton of osmunda fibre and he allowed himself the ghost of a smile. The complete extermination of every gardenia within a 50-mile radius. Laughter rippled. Someone started applause. It swelled until the glass panes trembled. I stood at the back, arms folded, grinning like a proud parent. Fritz circulated with silver trays of champagne and caviar blinis. Even Theodore Horstmann, the grouchiest orchid nurse alive, had a tear in his eye. At 10:17, the doorbell rang downstairs. 3 short, 1 long, our signal. I descended to find Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove, now Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore, on the stoop, cheeks pink from cold, arms full of white roses. A small boy, age 4, clung to her sable coat. "Archie," she said, eyes shining. "We were in town for the opening. May we come up?" The boys stared at me with huge green eyes, Victor Lang's eyes, softened by innocence. Wolfe met them in the main hall, still holding the prize bloom. Mrs. Whitmore, Evelyn, curtsied like a girl. "Mr. Wolfe, this is Jonathan. My husband adopted him last month. Victor's only legitimate child, born in Switzerland, hidden until the trials ended. He starts school in Newport next fall." The boy extended a mittened hand. "Sir, my mother says you made the bad flowers go away." Wolfe took the tiny hand with surprising gentleness. "I made the bad people go away, young man. Flowers are never bad, only misused." He actually knelt 7 tons of genius on one knee, and pinned a small corsage of absolution to the boy's coat. "Wear it in good health, and never trust anyone who offers you gardenias." The boy giggled. Evelyn's eyes filled. "We read about the prize. First place, International Orchid Society, $10,000. Congratulations." Wolfe rose, brushing imaginary dust from his trousers. "The money will buy a new cooling system. The prize," he glanced at the bloom, "is merely punctuation." Flashbulbs from the stairwell. Reporters had followed. Before anyone could object, Evelyn stepped forward and kissed Wolfe on both cheeks, European style, quick and sincere. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the painting, for the silence, for white flowers." Then she and the boy were gone, swallowed by a waiting Packard and the soft Manhattan snow. Upstairs, the judges announced the formal award. Wolfe accepted the gold medal with a nod so small it barely qualified as movement. Lewis Hewitt tried to make a speech. Wolfe cut him off with one raised eyebrow. Back in the office by noon, snow piling against the windows like forgiveness. Fritz served lunch. Oysters Rockefeller, squab in truffle sauce, and a 1929 Wiquem that glowed like liquid sunlight. Wolfe raised his glass. "To absolution, Archie, to closed books, to children who will never know what gardenias cost." I drank. The phone rang once. Private line. I reached. Wolfe stopped me again. Let it ring. It rang 8 times, then silence. We never answered. At 3 p.m. the snow stopped. Sunlight speared through the skylight, struck the prize absolution on Wolfe's desk, and turned it incandescent. He studied it for a long moment. "Archie, file the entire Lang dossier under extinct. Burn the folder. Scatter the ashes in the new compost bed." I obeyed. At 4 the doorbell did not ring. At 5 the streets were white and quiet. At 6, Fritz banked the fire. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, the gold medal resting on his middle mound, like a small, satisfied son. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "we begin again, something new, something that has never killed anyone." I poured 2 fingers of Remmers. "To tomorrow, then." He opened one eye. "To tomorrow, Archie. And to the permanent retirement of perfume." Dear listener, the Velvet Atrium is now a parking garage. The Lang painting hangs in the Met beside a plaque that reads simply, "Gift of those who survived." 5 murderers are dead or forgotten. 1 child wears white orchids to school. 1 widow grows roses by the sea. And in a quiet brownstone, 10,000 flowers bloom without scent, without memory, without guilt. The doorbell is silent. The gardenias are extinct. The case is closed for the final time. Close the book. Turn off the light. Dream only of white. Chapter 10. The doorbell rings again. The brownstone on West 35th Street looks exactly as it did in 1946. Same sandstone, same iron railings, same brass numbers. Only the orchids have changed. 10,000 Nero Wolfe Absolution hybrids now fill the plant rooms, pure white, scentless, glowing under LED skylights that obey Wolfe's original 1938 schedule to the minute. The house itself is a living museum. Wolfe's desk untouched, the red leather chair reupholstered in 1973, and again in 2012, the globe still showing Yugoslavia and the Belgian Congo. I, Archie Goodwin, age 1 to 22, preserved by a combination of clean living, Canadian whiskey, and XAI's quiet little longevity trials, stood in the office at 12:21 p.m. exactly, waiting. The doorbell rang. I opened it with the same smile I used in 1945. On the stoop stood a girl, 19, emerald silk coat over vintage jeans, green eyes sharp as broken glass. In her gloved hand, a single gardenia corsage wrapped in silver ribbon. "Mr. Goodwin." Her voice carried Park Avenue via TikTok. "My name is Evelyn Lang Whitmore, great-granddaughter of Evelyn Hargrove, granddaughter of Jonathan Whitmore, Jr. I need Nero Wolfe." I felt the years peel away like old wallpaper. "He died in 1975, I said gently. "But the house remembers. Come in." She crossed the threshold, and the scent of gardenia hit me like a suppressed memory. Wolfe's great-grandnephew, Dr. Nero Wolfe IV, Harvard, MIT, XAI Fellow, descended the stairs at 12:25 exactly. Same 7th of a ton build, same yellow shirt, same scowl. He even says "Pui" with the original inflection. He stopped 3 steps from the bottom. "Miss Lang Whitmore, state your business with brevity and precision." She opened a holographic envelope. A single sheet of cream crane's paper floated in mid-air, rotating slowly. Typed in pica, below the words, a crude dagger dripping crimson pixels. Same stationery, same Underwood ribbon, same threat, 80 years later. Wolfe IV's eyes narrowed to slits. "Archie, the ledger." I produced the original black oilcloth book from the safe, still smelling faintly of gardenia and 1945. Last page, a new entry, ink still wet. "My trust fund matures today. $100 million. Someone hacked the family DNA vault. They have Victor Lang's original genome. They're growing gardenias again, in orbit. 0 gravity, scent-enhanced, lethal pollen. They'll release them over Manhattan at 9 tonight unless I pay." Wolfe IV thought settled into the custom chair. Carbon fiber, reinforced same dimensions. Phui, blackmail is eternal. Gardenias are merely the vector. He tapped the desk, a hidden panel, irised open. Inside, a single white orchid in a sealed titanium pot. Absolution Prime, the original 1946 plant, still alive. "Archie, call Saul Panzer 7th. Tell him triple rate still applies. Then call Inspector Kramer. Yes, Kramer 9. Tell him the Tombs has a new wing." He turned to the girl. "You will remain here until 9:05. You will drink Fritz Nante's coffee. You will not touch the orchid." She nodded, eyes wide. I made the calls. At 8:57 p.m., the city lights dimmed. Someone had hacked Con Edison. At 8:58, every screen in Times Square lit up with the same rotating threat note. At 8:59, the brownstone's front door opened by itself. A drone the size of a hummingbird hovered in, carrying a single gardenia corsage, silver ribbon, crimson drops. Wolf 4 did not move. The drone dropped the corsage on the desk, directly atop Absolution Prime. Pollen exploded, visible, glittering, lethal. Wolf 4 exhaled once. The orchid absorbed it, every grain. The white petals flushed crimson, then returned to pure snow. The drone fell, circuits fried. On every screen in Manhattan, a new message appeared. The lights came back. The girl, Evelyn Lang Whitmore, laughed until she cried. Wolf 4 allowed himself one word. Satisfactory. At 9:05, the doorbell did not ring. It never would again.